Hello. This is an important lesson, lesson 1.4. It's where, having been presented with the personal pronouns and 5 verbs, the students are going to start already to put complete ideas together by forming complete sentences with a subject and a verb, and therefore verb conjugation. Now, conjugation is kind of a dirty word. It involves a lot of memorization and rules and verb endings to memorize. And no, it doesn't have to, and it must not. Our goal at this point is to help students think like a native speaker. A 2-year-old learns to conjugate verbs in his or her particular language almost invariably with success. They never learn any rules. They never have to be told, okay, from the infinitive form of the verb, drop this ending, which gives you just the stem, and to the stem you're going to add es, ons, ez, ent. No, that's not the way a native speaker learns to speak his or her language, and that's not the way we want our students to think either. We want to free them up to focus on what truly matters initially. That's the ability to express themselves. We want to unburden them of an unnecessary exposure to rules, graphs, charts, etc. Okay, so let me just very quickly explain to you how I try and get this idea of verb conjugation across. I use my hands. I simplify to the maximum. I accept initial imprecision and I model correct conjugation myself, all the while affirming students' comprehensible statements, albeit grammatically somewhat faulty. I affirm them, I encourage them. I want the student to believe that they can actually speak this language, okay? That it's not an impossible dream. So I'll give you a very specific example. Let's say I'm teaching French, and I'm teaching the verb habiter initially. It's conjugations in the present simple tense. And I'll say, okay, they already know habiter, faire, écouter, laver, dire. I say, okay, habiter, 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 habiter. Alors ce qu'on va faire, on va couper la fin, donc ça fait tchum, habite, habite, et puis, donc ça fait je, habitais, non, c'est pas ça, c'est je habite, tu habitais, tchum, habite, il habitait, tchum, habite. And then I get to elle, the same thing with elle, of course. And then vous habitez. I emphasize that the easy conjugation at the end. I use this gesture with my finger, and I have the students imitating me all the while with these hand motions and with the statements I'm saying. As they perform a motor activity, as they realize the simplicity of the sound factor, the spelling of these verb forms, I couldn't care less about the spellings at this point. I want to simplify the act of conjugation, and want it strictly to be an oral issue. That is to say, I want them to be able to understand what modification is made to the verb when they say it, or when it's said to them. I don't want them to be thinking about, of course, the spellings of the verb. So let's take Spanish as an example. I teach them initially that it's yo is always associated with o. Like I say, I have them actually do this gesture. Yo, o. Tú, s. Él, ella, yo, o. Tú, s. Él, ella. Entonces, tomemos el verbo, por ejemplo, tomar. Tomar, no, tomar yet. Let's take vivir. Yo, yo, o. Entonces, yo, vivir, vivo, yo vivo. Tú, vivir, vivir, vives. Él, vivir, vive. I don't try and explain to them, well, although it is an IR verb, the I within the stem, or the ending of the infinitive changes to the sound A in the third person singular. No. They catch on to that as time goes by. And if a student says to me, El vive in Chicago, I am delighted with him, just like you were delighted with your 2-year-old child when he or she said to you, as a tow truck went by in the street, car, there's a car. You didn't say, no, it's not a car. What's wrong with you? It's a tow truck. What are you thinking about? No, you said, that's right, a car. Yeah, it's called a tow truck. That's how you handle a first-year student in another language, learning a second language as well. You affirm their statement. You say, yeah, oui, c'est ça, tout à fait, voilà. Let's say, for example, they said in French, j'habitais à Détroit. Je habitais à Détroit. I'll say, ah oui, d'accord, tu habites à Détroit, c'est bien, oui, voilà. Oui, habitais, on coupe, habite à Détroit. J'habite, j'habite à Détroit. Bravo, c'est bien, c'est bien. I don't stop and say, no. The verb the pronoun je, followed by a vowel sound, is going to form a contraction, and you're going to drop the ending. No. I focus on the comprehensible nature of their statement to me. I understood it. It's a success on their part. And then I model a proper structure in my response to them or my repeating their statement, and I make a slight reference to the correction of what they did incorrectly, but without being overbearing, without putting too much emphasis upon the correction of their mistake. I model it, a quick reference to what they could have said differently, but not in a way that makes them feel disrespected or unsuccessful. Okay? So this whole area we're talking about here, conjugation, is a big issue. We hit it in 1.4. Approach it with a goal to simplify, to help the students understand the changes that they're going to make in the sounds that they pronounce. You're not worried about the spelling whatsoever. You don't want them to even see spelling. And you want them to feel successful. Okay, enough theory for the moment. Let's get into the practicalities of what's actually happening in this lesson. Here you see in the first section the video that the students can be assigned to watch outside of class, or if they're absent, they can watch it in order to keep up with what's going on in class. In the first section, therefore, after the video, you see the students are directed to simply listen. And this is usually going to be the case, that when a new concept is presented to them, the first section will ask them to listen, and the next section will be identical in appearance, and it will ask them to, okay, now say. They want the students to say what they think the correct statement should be, and then they click on the image to verify or to correct if they were wrong. Okay, so this first section, they're just listening. Notice how I have here 3 different images which are separated by some black space. What I'm trying to get across is these 3 images, 2 of which they're already acquainted with, and the third isn't too complex, that these are all distinct and be thought of distinctly. Here's the word. I'll do this in English, but try and think in your own language of how this would play out. I'll say here, he. Okay, they already know this is he. They know this is I, you, he, she. Okay, and here they know this is live. Okay, he, live, Detroit. Okay, he lived Detroit. And then I click on the complete sentence where the images are brought together to form a single statement, a unified idea, and the students are expecting to hear he lived Detroit, and they click and they hear he lives in Detroit. They hear, of course, the preposition in, and you can, by the way, find some gesture like in to get the idea across to them what that refers. But the focus here is he lives. Now we're dealing with English here. The addition of the s in the third person singular for he and she is really quite simple compared to the task that a French or Spanish teacher has to accomplish in teaching his or her students the verb conjugations of the present simple tense. But try and therefore think about it in terms of your own language. That the students are going to be surprised to recognize that this word, he, that they knew very well, and this word, live, suddenly a change transpires here. And so you should register on your face as well a little bit of surprise that this isn't what you expected to hear. He lived Detroit. He lives in Detroit. And you click down here on this image that conveys the same message. He lives in Detroit. Go on to the next section. Okay, he make or do bed. Okay, he do bed. And you click down here. He makes the bed. Makes. And so again, you register surprise, but you start to show the dawning of understanding. You say, he makes. He washes. He says. Okay, you start to hypothesize regarding this transformation that takes place in the verb as he, or later on they'll find out she, serve as the subject of the sentence. Okay, so you're getting across in this section. Here you see all the verbs are brought into play. Here's listen, here's wash, here's say. They start to see that when a subject and a verb are put together, that a transformation occurs in the verb of some kind. Now, they don't know what kind of transformation it is yet, but the next section is about to introduce that to them. In this next section, they're again to listen. They're to listen to the to what, as you are going to recognize, are the verb conjugations of the singular verb conjugations. Here you have in red the infinitives, and here you have in blue, of course, the personal pronouns. And when let's do this, and I'll do this in French for a moment. This is habiter. When you put the personal pronoun je together with habiter, they click. They'll hear j'habite. The click here, tu habites, il habite, elle habite, vous habitez. Okay. So habite. This I heard habiter. And this I do this with my hands. I try to represent the changes in sound by my hands, so that students who have something very visual to refer to as they think about these grammatical changes that are taking place. Habite, or faire, fait, or écouter, écoute, or dire, dit, or laver, lave, and the same thing in Spanish. Hacer, hace, hacer, no, hace, hacer, no, hace, okay? Lavar, 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 lava. Muy bien, lavar. No, lava. I try to emphasize, using my hands, this chopping off of the end of the verb that occurs at least in the third person singular, with él and with ella. Spanish is a little more complex. We have additional sound changes that occur. And so I teach them to associate yo, o, tú, s, él, ella, usted, and I have to make these sounds and use their hands as well, imitating me, so that they would start to get a sense of the changes that occur without me using grammatical rules. I'm just I'm having them perform some motor activities and make some sounds at the same time, which become really quite automatic for them as time goes by. Okay, so in this section, they're listening and hearing these transformations that take place as they click on each of these different pronouns. And then they come to the next section where they're to say the conjugation as opposed to listening to it first. They say it, and then they'll click after to confirm whether they were right or to determine if they were incorrect in their conjugation. And so, and the term conjugation, by the way, they're totally oblivious to it. I don't bother with grammatical terminology. So here's habiter, for example, in French, and this is they'll say, okay, on the basis of what they were just presented in the previous section, okay, je habitais, no, so je habite, Je habite. Je habite. Now click in there here. J'habite. And I think, oh, j'habite. Je habite. Je habite. J'habite. Oh yeah, the teacher did this. Je habite. J'habite. 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 Okay, je habite. Okay, then tu habites. Tu habites. Tu habites. Tu habites. T'habites. And they'll click in there here. Tu habites. And they'll say, oh no, it doesn't work. You don't make a contraction there. It's tu habites, etc. So the students try to form the conjugation themselves. They click to see if they're right or wrong, and they start to verify their hypotheses concerning how these verbs are conjugated or formed. The term conjugated, they don't know that term. I don't want them to think in terms of grammatical terminology, but that's what they're doing, of course, is conjugating a verb. Next section, they're just forming complete statements, talking about these images here. He says hello, he makes the bed, he lives in Detroit, he listens to music, etc. In the particular language they're studying. Here, they're going to try to remember the personal pronouns, and this is something which comes from lesson 1.3, the previous lesson. Now, here is the first time they're actually going to start forming complete sentences with a personal pronoun or a subject pronoun, a verb, and then either a prepositional phrase or an object of some kind. Okay, so they're forming complete statements on their own for the first time. They're to say these themselves. So they'll raise their hand, you'll call on them, they'll make the statement. Here we have, he lives in Detroit, I live in Detroit, you live in Detroit, she lives in Detroit, and you formal live in Detroit. Now this brings up the whole topic of oral participation. This is the first lesson, and from here it's going to become hopefully a regular part of your class. So the students raise their hand, are called upon to make a statement, and they get credit for the participation that occurs in the course of the class. Now, if you saw let me go back and show you in the teacher's manual, the 4 videos. You've these 4 videos right here. Oral participation received an enormous amount of attention in those videos, and I hope you've watched them. If you haven't, or if you have, I'm not going to go into great detail right now. I'll just try and come up with some summary statements about oral participation to save us some time. In the first year, it's the most important tool a teacher has, especially the first year, to ensure that students will eventually attain fluency. It should be weighted very heavily in the grade. I give 50% of the first year grade exclusively to oral participation, 40% to oral test scores, and then 10% to miscellaneous assignments. Oral participation needs to be very objectively and very accurately measured, so there's no sense of favoritism, and so students understand that if they participate on a regular basis in class, they can succeed in this class, but that they must participate orally. Well, those are probably the biggest themes, I suppose, from those 4 videos when I talk about oral participation. Now we're going to scroll down. And in the Teachers Resources section, you have 2 different buttons, 2 forms, about which I spoke in great detail in these 4 videos. One of the forms is called the Seating Chart and Record Keeping Spreadsheet. In fact, here it is. It's a sheet in which I have 3 room for 1, 2, 3 classes on one side, and then 3 classes on the other. It's a sheet that I put on a clipboard in class. It's a sheet on which I mark essentially every activity that occurs in class, from attendance issues to test scores to oral participation in class, and even to inappropriate behavior. It all goes on this record-keeping sheet right here. And at the end of the day, I take it and transfer the information to, number 4 here, the oral participation evaluation spreadsheet. So let me show you first of all what this, up close on the screen, what this spreadsheet looks like, the seating chart and record-keeping spreadsheet. It looks like, if I can find it here, this right here. Okay, here's the room for the first class, the second class, and the third class. And this first class right here is the only one which I have marked for now. I'll say it's the first hour of the day. First of all, I want to point out that you're thinking, how could you teach a class and be keeping all these records on this piece of paper at the same time? That's just not realistic. No, you're absolutely right. I don't do it myself. My students do this for me. And in order to ensure that I show no favoritism, that my system is completely objective, and there's a routine that we always follow on a standard basis, this is what I do. I take the date of the month of which during which the current class is taking place. You see up in the corner here I have September 7th. It's the first day of school, potentially, or somewhere in the first week of school. So what I do is I go to the 7th person because it's the 7th person in the seating chart, and this person goes and sits at my laptop on the other side of the screen in the front of the classroom, on which the video projector is projecting my lesson. They sit at my desk, they operate my laptop as I give them instruction, and that way my hands are free, my eye contact is maintained with my students. Now that was the 7th person because it's the 7th of September. The next person in order, I flip my clipboard to them, and the students take that clipboard, that student takes the clipboard and is responsible for marking everything from absences to tardies to negative behavior that I indicate is to be noted on the sheet, and to these hash marks you see right here. These hash marks are the oral participation comments or points that the students receive. So it's correct. I don't do this notation myself. The students do it. By the way, you may note at the top of the screen here that there's a key. In fact, between each class there's this key. A is for absent, T is for tardy, E is for excused, which means excused in the midst of class for whatever reason, and then interruption would be a horizontal line. So in this particular class, you see that student number 12 was, and I would have names here instead of numbers, but to simplify things, I'm just putting student number 1, 2, 3, 4. Student number 12 was absent. Student number 6 was tardy. Student number 11 in some way interrupted instruction, and I felt it was important enough that I asked the student to make note of the student number 7 who was keeping track of or number 8 who was keeping track of my records, to put in a horizontal line to indicate that I was interrupted and by some negative behavior. And then all these other marks indicate, of course, that the students contributed orally in the course of class discussion. So when the day is finished, I take this record sheet right here, set it to the left of my keyboard, put on my glasses since I'm an old man and I can't see the details there, and then I open up my oral participation evaluation spreadsheet. There it is, and it's all ready to go. And I'll show you just how quick it is once you've got the spreadsheet set up with some basic initial activities, how quick it is to note on a daily basis the results in your classes. By the way, I just mentioned the setup of this oral participation and evaluation spreadsheet. Let me show you back in the teacher's manual where a video talking about the setup can be found. See number 5, the oral participation evaluation spreadsheet setup and use. And it's a video that explains exactly how to set up this oral participation evaluation spreadsheet, how to use it, and you can consult it if you decide you'd like to download and use this particular form. Okay, so here's all I have to do. I have the spreadsheet with the seating chart and the results of the day next to my keyboard. I go to the 7th of September, which is the first day here. Click on student number 1, and I enter the results. 3, 6, 2, 4, 1, nothing, 1, 4, 1, 7, 2, nothing, 3, nothing, 6, and 2. Good, at 16, I didn't make a mistake. Now, I do have one student who had a negative participation, so I'm going to go, and by the way, you see the grades have already been entered in here. If you go to that video to which I referred about the oral participation spreadsheet setup, it will explain the whole issue of how grades are determined, at least in some detail. So the student was student number 11, who participated negatively. Here's negative participation, is column D, a 1, and watch what happens to the grade. The grade goes down. You have to decide, the first day of class, it drops dramatically. It's like a baseball batting average after the first game. It means very little. After 15, 20 different oral participation sessions, that grade might have dropped by 1 point because of one negative participation point, you might say. You nonetheless have to decide, it's totally optional. Do you want to keep records of negative participation and have it impact the student's grades? You don't need to. Like I said, it's totally optional. I put it there just so you could see how it would affect the student grade by entering it in. And then I had one student who was absent, and so that was student number 12. And I'm going to scroll across to the absence section, which is right here. September 7th, student number 12. I put the letter A, a capital A. And there we have it. And if we go back, you'll note that the student has no grade so far. In other words, whereas before he or she had a 50%, which is a failing grade because they hadn't made a single statement, well, they weren't in school that day. Of course they didn't make a statement. They couldn't. And therefore, they don't have a grade at this point. The purpose of the marking the absences in this spreadsheet is that it ensures that students will not be hurt in any way by being absent in the course of a class discussion. Okay, so that's the whole issue of oral participation. Now, what I just did for you, in showing this to you, I'll be very honest. In the first week of classes, I show the students this information also. I'll stop class with 3 minutes to go in the class. I'll put the spreadsheet up on the screen. I'll fill in the information right in class with the students watching. And some may think, that's kind of cruel. You're putting the students' grade right up there for everybody to see. Yeah, if this were halfway through the marking period or toward the end of the marking period, yeah, that'd be harsh. That'd be way too cruel. Huh? But not the first week, because grades are going to change dramatically. I would do this again the second day. I do it again the third day. That's probably about it. And students will see how rapidly their scores can change based upon their participation in class. And they will see that there is a real return for their participation. And similarly, there's an obligation to participate. They've got to get involved orally, because if they don't, they're not going to succeed in this class. I think if I'm going to give 50% of their grade to oral participation, it's my obligation to let the students see this system, see how this actually functions, because they could go a couple weeks and be totally oblivious to the fact that their silence in class is burying them under a weight of negative results. And so I feel it's my obligation, and I think it's a very healthy motivation for the students also to get them regularly raising their hands, because what's that proverb I focused on in those videos? You can't steer a car until it's moving. You've got to get their mouth speaking so that you can slowly start to refine their speech, and so that they themselves will feel comfortable with speaking the language. Okay, well, that's the whole issue of oral participation. And I'm going to go back now to the lesson we were talking about, which is lesson 1.4. There's just one more thing I'd like to point out. That's the whole issue of testing in this lesson. This lesson concludes with a test. And if you go down here to almost the bottom, you'll see where it is right there, stop signs. These stop signs indicate that a test is taking place. And there is a stopwatch here in the middle. The stopwatch is to the side of it is a period of time, which is the maximum amount of time the students have during which to perform this particular test. Okay, so I'm going to open the stopwatch. And I'm going to, very important, choose always, and click with my right mouse button on the blue bar at the top of the stopwatch. Choose always on top, and put it up here where it's out of the way, but I can still refer to it. And then I'm about ready to start the test with the students. And this test is composed of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 statements the students have to make. These are statements that came from the lesson itself, in which they put a subject together with a verb and either a prepositional phrase or an object. And they have to make these statements in a period of 1 minute, which means they have exactly 5 seconds on an average per statement to get through, to say the statement and to get through the entire test. Now, how do I grade the test? You'll notice that to the far right here, there's a percent sign. This percent, if you click on it, gives you, the teacher, a key by which to determine how you would grade this test. You see that the personal pronoun is worth 1/2 a point. The verb is worth 1/2 a point, which means they came up with the right verb. Whether they conjugated it correctly or not is a different matter. The conjugation is 1 point. Additional vocabulary, that is to say the object or the prepositional phrase, is another 1/2 a point. Therefore, each item on the test, and there are a total of 12 of them, is worth 2.5 points, which means the total test has 30 points on it. So this is how you would determine, and you can modify it according to your own emphases or your own sense of what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. But this is what I'm proposing to you. The test has 30 points on it. And so you'd have the student come and meet with you one-on-one. Usually when my students are meeting with me one-on-one, I've told the other students in the class what the next lesson is that they are to study. Hopefully they have workstations in the classroom or tablets they can use to study the next lesson. Although typically, until it's their turn to meet with you one-on-one, they're just studying that current lesson, preparing for the test. And after they've finished, then they go on and study the next lesson that I've indicated to them. You want to keep them, of course, gainfully occupied. In the worst case scenario, if you don't have workstations available to them or tablets in class, well, then you can have one student operate a laptop along with hooked into the projector, and they can show the remainder of the class, those who are waiting to be tested, you can show them the next lesson. But that's certainly far from the ideal. So here's how the test will take place, one-on-one. The student has 1 minute, and I'll start. You'll say, "Okay, you ready? Go." I live in Detroit, and you'll be scrolling this down for them. She lives in Detroit. Él hace la cama. Yo hago la cama. Elle fait le lit. J'écoute de la musique. Vous écoutez de la musique. You wash your hands. I wash my hands. She washes her hands. Yo digo hola. Usted dice hola. Stop. Okay, of course, only one language, not 3 different languages at the same time. The student only took 33 seconds and didn't make a single mistake. And so, of course, the score would be 100%. What if the student only got through, let's say, 10 statements in 60 seconds? Since 60 seconds was the limit. Well, then all the points, this is the way I would handle it. You can determine if you want to be more merciful, but all the points from numbers 11 and 12 would be deducted from their score. And since there were 2.5 points per item, that means they've lost 5 points by not completing these last 2 statements, 25 out of 30. Even if all the previous statements were absolutely correct, they'd have a score of 83%, 25 out of 30. Why is that so? Why is this whole timing issue so important? It goes back to the issue of linguistic reflexes. Remember, we're trying to form in the student the ability to form a complete statement without any reflection, either in terms of printed text or in their native language. And so that's what the purpose of the accelerating PowerPoint, by the way. Let's go back to the previous section. Here's an accelerating PowerPoint that you've seen before in previous lessons. That's the whole point of this activity, is that you start out with 4 seconds during which to complete a task, and then 3 seconds, and then 2 seconds at the end. You want the students to be going so quickly that there's no time to think in English or whatever their native language happens to be. So I think that that's probably all that I really wanted to communicate to you in the course of this particular very long video, and I apologize for its length, but there were some very big, very important issues with which I needed to deal. I hope these were helpful to you.